Welcome to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. I have been looking forward to this episode for a really long time since I first got in touch with Yvonne and I initially spoke with Dolly Marshall. But welcome back, Yvonne. Thank you for joining us again this week. And I would love to introduce everyone to Dolly Marshall. Dolly, thank you so much for coming on to join us today. I am so excited to share your story. I was really inspired the last time we spoke. So I just want to start off by allowing you to introduce yourself and tell everyone who you are and dive more into your story. So who are you, Dolly?
I'm Dolly Marshall, which is my maiden name. I was Dolly Black for 25 years, married with a bunch of kids and adopted, biological, and foster, and lots of animals. We were talking about cats just a minute ago. We had 20 cats at one time. This Rosie the Riveter thing has just come up so recently, something that we never even thought of for 50 years. But I love your name, the Mavens of Manufacturing, and everyone to whom I've spoken has just thought it was great because I have some independent women friends who just love that name.
That makes me really happy and excited. I'm so glad because part of the reason why I chose the type of branding that I did for Mavens is because the 1940s was such an inspiring era for me. When we learned about it in history class, and I have a personal connection because my grandfather actually left Germany during that time because he didn't want to be part of the Nazi youth. So he came over to the United States when he was 19. And we didn't find out until like a couple years ago that he was actually considered a criminal because he went AWOL and he wasn't ever allowed to go back there. And we just found out that recently. So that was kind of an interesting history of our family. But with the Rosie the Riveter movement, it really did open up a lot of opportunities for women now. In manufacturing, and there's just so many opportunities available. So I'm really excited to hear more about your story. And I know one of the things that you did when you were in high school was you did plane spotting, which I didn't know what that was until I had an initial conversation with you. So can you kind of explain what that was and how you got involved with it and what the process was?
We were, I guess, around 13, 14, and they came around. Most of the young men had already left. We lost a lot of our senior class that year because they were all in the service. And they came around and asked us if anybody would like to learn how to be a plane spotter. And we went to study to learn the silhouettes of both domestic and foreign planes because we lived near about 60 miles from the coast, from the Atlantic Ocean. And we learned later that there were submarines all the time out there sinking ships. There was oil on the beaches. So apparently this was really a real need. And they trained us to do this. And then we were up in the high school press box because that was the highest place around. And also there was a designated phone that we used. And I still don't know where it went because that was probably a secret place. But we would have, I think we had like a 4-hour shift. And if you were in the daytime, you could actually see the planes, of course. But at night, you would just pick up the phone and report that you heard a plane. You'd say what direction that was coming from, which direction it was going, and whether it was high or low. And that was the information they needed. And
that's so interesting. I already know that I would be terrible at that type of job because I'm so terrible with directions. My husband was in the Army and he knows how to, it's northwest or northeast. And I'm just like, can you tell me what landmark is there or what store it's close to? I can never get those types of directions out there. So I already know I would be terrible about that. But during that time, did you have to do that by yourself or was there a group of people?
There were always two of us. I wouldn't want to be in a canoe with you if you don't know left from right.
We'd be stranded at sea. It would not be a good situation.
Not a good fit. Yeah, there were always two of us. And this same friend and I always worked together. And
Okay.
I don't think any of the boys did it. I think it was all pretty much girls at that time.
That's
And
so interesting.
I gave it another thought until I learned about the Rosies here in Eugene, Springfield area, and everyone I know says the same thing. They, we never told our kids about it. We never told it was just something in our past that you just did, along with saving tin cans and fat and all the rationing and stuff. It was just what we could do for the war effort. And at that time, too, to get into a football game, you had to take a certain amount of metal to be melted down and used.
Really? That's so interesting. I know my mom collected tin cans, but I didn't really understand the whole reasoning behind it. So that's interesting. It's amazing how you take those types of materials for granted and they become a really important part during a war effort. So during high school, what sort of type of like classes were you interested in?
Well, I was the first girl to ever take what was called the scientific course. It required a few more credits, and I had drafting and shop, and I'm trying to think what are the other things. And so that kind of put me on the path of being the only woman very often in the drafting room later when I was working. And in college, I was one of two. And the other woman said that she was there because it was all boys and she was hoping to find a husband. I was there to learn industrial design, which was a fairly new study at the time. And
that's right.
Very good stead later.
So how was it back in that time to be one of the few women involved in courses like that? Did you ever face any kind of like negativity or harassment, or was it just like, it's
not in college, because it was an art school and there were a lot of very casual bohemian types and what we would kind of called hippies later on, and we were all, and they had a sorority and everyone was invited to sorority, so it wasn't like most of the colleges at that time were very anti-Semitic and also racist, but anybody who went to the school could join the sorority. So it was a lot of the time too, in my work too, although in school, in high school and college, I had no problems. But when you getting to work, being the only woman in the drafting room was sometimes, there was a lot of harassment, sexual harassment sometimes. But you kind of build up, you figure if you're going to make this kind of money and be there, you just build a strong defense and just ignore it. And then later on, they had affirmative action in my last job. So there was no question. And I've never actually had what most women had, which is lower salary, because most of my jobs, you applied for the job, which already had a salary listed. So it didn't matter if you were a woman or a man. So I've been lucky that way.
So that's interesting because there seems to be a switch now in terms of like job recruitment, where a lot of people are not listing what the salary is or the hourly pay until much later on in the interview process. So that's really interesting. But yeah,
is to keep their sexist policies.
Yeah. And unfortunately, in the sector, there's still some of that negative, harassment going on. And there's some areas and situations where it's a good old boy club. But it's really exciting nowadays because there are a lot more women who are climbing up the leadership ladder. And I just spoke with a woman not too long ago. She started out at a company where she was a receptionist. And she worked her way up the ladder and the company went up for sale, and she just loved it so much that she actually spoke out and said, hey, I'm interested in purchasing the company and owning it. And they were able to work something out with the owners. And now she has 3 or 4 daughters herself, and they're all involved in the company. And she works really diligently to make the workforce as balanced as possible. And she has like a 50-50 male to female ratio at her company. And I wanted her to come on Mavens, and she's like, I definitely want to do Mavens, but I don't want to be the focus of it. I really want to focus on the women workers here. So we're going to do like a group interview coming up with all of the women that she works with. And I'm really excited because she just, it shows that, you know, there's room for growth in the sector, and there's a lot of opportunities, and you can start out as a receptionist and then become the owner.
Oh, go girl.
Yeah, right.
I love
Right.
stories like that. That just really.
Yeah. So during that time, as you were working your way through college and stuff, did you ever think that you were setting an example for later generations to follow?
No, never analyzed it in any way or gave it any other thought. I was just looking after my divorce for a way to make money to live. I forgot when I was thinking about getting divorced that I was going to have to eat. So
Yeah. Right.
and it is hard when you to get back into the. I was 40, close 50s, in my 50s, so it was really hard to get back into the workforce.
Mhm.
But then I got into I think it was called Vista program, where I learned machine shop work. They were retraining people, and that
Okay.
was a great program. But then when I went to the machine shops to actually look for the jobs, that people were smoking, and that didn't work. And I went back into drafting, and that did me very well. I drafted in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and California, and I worked kind of like Kelly Girl, full time, temporary.
So
What about your pipeline construction?
Well, that was my very last job in California, and that was the best job I've ever had because you were out in the air all day, and actually there were like 50 some steps to climb into the office. So I got my exercise every day going up and doing it, and part of a lot of math because we started with the blueprint, original blueprint, and I ordered all the materials, and then I was the one that went out and kept track of exactly where they really put the pipe, which sometimes couldn't be done exactly according. And then I drew up the final blueprint. And there I had a little trouble once or twice. There were a couple of kind of misogynistic kind of guys, but basically the men with whom I worked were wonderful. I would climb down in the ditch and put my arms up, and they just pull me out. And they were teaching me to do a little welding and a little front end loading, and each of their jobs, which were very specific. They would teach me a little bit of it. They were very, very nice to me. The people, the immediate workers.
That's great. I can just imagine like going somewhere and seeing, men pulling a body out of an area and wondering what is going.
Yeah, what's going on? And of course, we're hard hats, and if you wanted metal toe shoes and stuff like that. But it was a great job. It paid well. I had wonderful holidays, and you could do an IRA, which helped me later on. It was just a wonderful job. And so last year, when I was lucky enough to be with a bunch of the other Rosies on the calendar for the Women in Industry, I think it's called, raise your hand.
Yeah, Washington Women in Trades. Yeah,
Women in Trade. And we went to a banquet, and it was wonderful to meet all these young women who are plumbers and electricians and climb up poles. And, now there's just so many women doing all these wonderful trades and making real money.
Okay, sorry about that, you guys. I think we had a little technical glitch there, which is sometimes common with live broadcasting. So I kind of missed out on some of your conversation there, Dolly. What were you guys mentioning before?
That when we went to Seattle because the Women in Trades organization had us on their a couple of us Rosies on their calendar, and they had a very large affair, and we met just tons of younger women who are now climbing up telegraph poles, being electricians, being plumbers, construction workers, and it was just great to speak with all these women.
That's great. So that leads me into my next question. And Yvonne, you can join in too on this because that's how you and I connected. I was doing some research on, the 1940s and looking up things for Rosie the Riveter. and the American Rosie the Riveter Association came up, and I sent out a request and you responded. So I wanted to get some backstory on how Dolly became part of that association, and what are some of the things that you like that the association does, and what your overall mission and goal is to be a part of that organization.
So I'll just start by saying it's a new organization, relatively, 1998, a riveter, a World War II riveter, now living in Alabama, started the organization. And a woman in Cottage Grove near us, she started a chapter here. So now Dolly, I got involved because my mother was a welder during World War II. She was part of the Boilermakers Union and worked in Tacoma, Washington at the shipyards. So that's how I got involved, but I don't know how Dolly found out about the group. Do you remember?
It's funny, I don't really remember how I did. Because, gee, I really don't. It may be because it was meeting at the senior center and I was going there for some classes.
That's what it was. That's what it was. We started talking to you at the senior center when we met. We have a monthly meeting and lunch. And they always are really gracious to introduce us and say, oh, the Rosies are with us. And that's how Dolly found out about us, because you'd been volunteering at the senior center, hadn't you?
Oh, yeah. But I
Plus your exercise.
Of this organization, and I lived in 8 states, and it just never ever came up. And I was thinking afterwards too, we get to talk about it, and the people with whom I did this, we never discussed. Remember when it just was
just part of what you did.
Yeah.
So what are some of your favorite things being part of an association? Because with me personally, when I talked to you the first time, I just was in such a great mood the rest of the day because your story was so inspiring to me. And I just appreciate, all of the things that the Riveters did back in that day. And I just think that you're so humble about the things that you do. And I know that you're really proactive in civil rights and human rights, and what is your biggest takeaway, I guess, when you talk to younger generations? What's your favorite thing?
Yeah, that we do speak to different people, but yes, the younger ones, to speak to the young women in the high school level is the best thing, and to see their eyes light up, and they're always really happy to hear us. Their enthusiasm, it's just wonderful to see this. That's the biggest thing. A couple times I've come to tears that
Now she's doing it to me.
Yeah, it's just so different from what life was earlier on. It's just wonderful to see how it can be now for these young women, the opportunity.
So I don't know if it's wrong for me to bring this up, but I just got a kick out of it the last time we talked about it. But you've been arrested, correct?
Yes, a couple of times.
Do you want to get into that and explain what you were doing for?
I guess somewhere around Vietnam, I suddenly became aware of what was going on in the United States. And up to that time, actually, I was so concentrated on my family that I really didn't pay attention to either local or national politics. So I was in California, and we started demonstrating at the naval, depot, I guess. It was like a naval depot. And people like Ed Asner and Michael Sheen used to come there and demonstrate. And actually, one young man got his legs cut off. It was at a train depot that we did our demonstrations. And the train just decided they were unhappy, and they ran right over. And so it was a very serious time. It was. And we just felt the war was absolutely not a way. And I also became a Quaker somewhere along the line. And of course, now I'm a pacifist, and it just doesn't seem like killing people is any way to solve a political problem.
Right.
And we got arrested actually at the site where they do all the nuclear testing down in the desert, Southern California, Nevada.
And they were doing quite a bit at that time. So that's just a great cause for you to be out there.
A bit, and they only did it when the wind was blowing toward the native reservation, not when it was blowing toward Las Vegas. And that's where all the women have breast cancer. I don't know if you ever knew of Buffy St. Marie, but she wrote a song about the one-breasted women.
I'll have to look into that. I've never heard of that. That's so interesting. And that seems to be a thing too coming up where another one was in Russia, Chernobyl, and they had a lot of complications after the fact. So it's just interesting to see how certain things we do to like either make energy or produce it can cause, harmful effects later on. So what are some of the things that you still are doing to be proactive? I know COVID was a challenge to us all, and it kept us pretty isolated from one another. And I know, Yvonne, you talked about how it created quite a big challenge for the group of Rosies because of their age. How did you guys work around all of that to still stay connected and be sociable?
Dolly's the one who can do it. She inspired me like, okay, if she can get on her computer and talk to people, we ought to be able to Zoom. So Dolly's the one that got us started on Zoom.
Didn't realize that.
Hey, but Dolly, I want to know, before we talk about some of the other things about the Zoom, I wanted to know before COVID, you did some protests here in Eugene, didn't you? What were you?
I'm usually in the parades or whatever, the demonstrations, at least for a short time, on any of the ones that are environmental or peace or.
And there was the women's movement, the
pink hats,
pink,
hats and went down. And actually, there's a big group here. You'd have a lot of activists here. We have several really good peace organizations in the community, and also right now the big thing is with one of the groups with whom I work is the homeless, and we went out to just be a presence while they were being dragged away from where they were living under a bridge. The police were taking them away, and it was actually something that was against the general local laws to move them, because they had no place to go. And if they can't get the place to go, they're not supposed to be able to. Anyway, we went just to be a presence, and that's kind of, we're working on things in that area now with this one church group. So,
were they
we didn't talk about how old Dolly is. So Dolly, you're about 70, right?
I'll be 92 in 2 weeks.
Oh, see, I thought you were 93. I was telling everyone you were 93.
No.
Nice.
I said you were 93 in 2 weeks. Are you sure you're not 93 in 2 weeks?
No, I'm 92.
Oh, okay. You're just.
I always have done this. When it gets close to my birthday, I say that's how old I am. But I have to live another year now because my iris are doing so well this year, and I'm hoping next year they'll be even prettier. So
you have to stick around for that. That's funny.
Yeah.
So she's probably going to donate the money to. I know you donate to a lot of good causes, but we won't talk about that. But during can you say some of the other things that we've done during this pandemic, such as last Friday?
Oh, yes. Well, you could tell better about that than I.
We finally were able to meet person to person in the park with the Rosie the Riveter roses. Throughout the United States, there are Rosie the Riveter rose gardens, and those roses are actually called Rosie the Riveter roses. And they're throughout the United States, and we met and had lunch in the park, face to face. The roses are in beautiful bloom. And guess why they're called Rosie the Riveter roses? Because the Weeks Roses was looking for a name for these roses.
Okay.
And he said, I have these roses that are strong, independent, and beautiful.
That's fantastic. So it's like a memorial for everyone all over the place. That's
Right.
great.
And the Rosies meaning all women who helped during the World War II era, you know, not just riveters, but all the women who helped. It's honoring them.
And our
That
99-year-old member was there on Friday. Our
Our
99.
99-year-old member was there Friday. See, Dolly is very young for a Rosie because she was
I'm the
plane
baby.
spotting when she was in high school.
yeah.
So our 99-year-old member was there, a couple of 96-year-olds,
Yep, that's what-
and a 94-year-old, and then our baby, 92 years old.
That's incredible. I like aspire to have that much energy and still keep going at that age because I mean that it's there's not many people that can make that feat and that's great.
Well, I am so lucky, and my family dies quite young actually, and I always anticipated dying at 72 at the latest. And so I'm a poor lady now because my planning was for 72. So I'm very grateful, but very surprised.
you might have to enter back into the workforce now just because doing something different.
You do miss working, I think, because I didn't kind of retire formally. I just sort of stopped getting many jobs. I was still teaching aquatics. I've always taught swimming and life saving, but other than that, I just sort of dwindled away from working when I moved back east from California. So it would be fun to work again, I think.
One thing I've always noticed about the Rosies is how strong and independent they still are. I mean, for example, that we go out to schools and we go out to community groups and speak. And another thing that I notice is their independence in travel. You've done a lot of traveling, Dolly. I mean, like you didn't even talk about the Peace Corps.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I was after my divorce, I went in the Peace Corps in Ecuador. And
Okay.
we did appropriate technology. So we were doing things like solar because we were right on the equator. So we were doing solar installations. And I was, everybody in my group was about 21 or 22. And I think there was one young couple, there were one 40-year-old couple. But there were some older people, but I was the only older one in our particular omnibus.
So during that time, was there any place that you were teaching, the people that you're around, like how solar worked, or what were some of the things that
We were actually building solar installations
That's awesome.
in the different towns, things like solar showers, because most people didn't have we didn't have running water or bathrooms or anything like that. We were up in the country. So we weren't teachers per se. We were more demonstrating and actually, I guess teaching in a way. But it was interesting because there the men still were surprised that I could even drive. That was kind of and that I would leave my grandchildren to go away. It was horrifying to them that I would leave grandchildren and go away for that time. But it was one of the best experiences of my life. It was, we got giardia and amoebas and ringworm, and it was the best experience of my life.
That's one of the things that I'm trying to encourage my daughter to do now because she's going to graduate from high school next year, and she's really dead set on entering the medical industry. And she already has like her top 2 colleges picked out, and she's done really, really well. And she's dead set on doing a 4-year program at a university. And I told her, I was like, I think what you need to do is maybe take a year or 2 off before you go to school and travel, because she's never really been outside of the local area we're in. And I told her, I was like, I think if you travel outside of the country and travel within the country, you can really start to get a hold of some of the major issues that are going on in the world and here in our country, and find your passion through that, and maybe, yeah, still be part of medical, but maybe part of it in a manufacturing or engineering way. So I'm still trying to like swing her over
Well,
some way that I can, but
because it's just when you've actually lived in another culture, it's just so amazing. I mean, it's nothing like reading about it and even traveling as a tourist. I mean, this is just so, your whole life is just in it, and
yeah,
that changes your whole perception on life and the world. And I think you're doing a great job there. And also she would come out with a little money.
yeah.
They
And
not
because
much,
I'm still
not much,
paying off
but
my student
and
debt right now.
they hope to open up again soon. They're hoping to go back to I mean, nobody's there now. They all came home during COVID, but they really are hoping to open up again. And we did just get some more funding from Washington.
That's great.
We
That's
have a
really
very good return Peace Corps group here in town, and we do volunteer stuff different places too.
I love that you're still so active and you're still passionate about what you believe in, and I think that's really amazing. And I'm curious to know, because I mean, I don't know how involved with manufacturing and engineering you still are, but a lot of things have changed since the 40s, especially with all of the advances in technology that are coming out, especially with automation. And I was reading an article today for a blog that I'm writing on telemedicine, and just the increase in patients using technology like this, where we're talking right now in a virtual space. They're really coming out with a lot of different devices that help monitor different health issues, so that this way patients don't have to travel all the time or spend the money to sit in a waiting room to wait to see a doctor. They get that one-on-one right away. So I'm just curious to know if there's anything that you've seen recently, whether it's technology or manufacturing, that you're curious about or excited about, or
Well,
wondering how the heck's that going to happen.
oh, well, yeah. I still look at things and think, how on earth do they make these now? And the stuff that they make on the, oh gosh, my nephew.
The printers?
The build.
Are you talking?
They build the things with paper and, oh shucks, my mind's.
Well, they have those laser printers where they make.
Yeah. That just blows me away.
Where they make real working objects on these
and
printers.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
they can build with those now. I mean, not just little. Yeah, that blows me away. And on TV, whenever there's anything about a factory, I always watch. When we were training for the industrial design, they used to take us to factories all the time, because if you were going to design something, you had to know how it could be built. So I still love to go to factories if I get a chance. If they're having, like, usually now they're just like candy factories or something like that.
Yeah.
But anytime they have an opening, I will always go to those. So, but what's going on now is just mind blowing. Compared to how we used to do it. Or most everything I did was by hand and even on a light table. And of course, now everything is done on computers.
And they're bringing in more robotics too, so that people don't have to put themselves in pretty dangerous situations, which is interesting. And the printers that you mentioned, the 3D ones, they actually are building bigger ones that can make houses or shelters in different areas of the world. So it's like a cheaper shelter option, which is really interesting.
Yeah, that's a big thing in my mind.
Right, and we have a Rosie who made prosthetics during the war for the returning soldiers, the returning troops, and that was a very hard emotional job, actually. It was hard on her, but now they can do some 3D printer prosthetics too, I understand. And so that's a real technology boost.
So We're getting close to the end, but before I let both of you go, I was just wondering, Dolly, if there's any advice that you would like to give to younger generations who might be considering a career pathway in manufacturing or might be hesitant about it, what sort of advice would you provide them? Or, maybe, after all of your years, maybe talking to your younger self again, what sort of advice would you give to younger generations or your younger self again, if you could?
I'm so bad at this kind of thing. Because when I was young, I didn't think deeply about anything. And I do think if people would be a little better at analyzing what maybe they think they are like and what they'd like to do, but go for it. That's the main thing. Don't be afraid. Just go for it. And if you fail the first time or so, this is kind of basic to any organization or any jobs. Just figure you can do it.
I think that one of the key takeaways I've taken from having conversations with you is to just ignore the negativity as well too. A lot of women that I've talked to have repeatedly said, you need thick skin in this industry to succeed, and I think you're a prime example of that. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously, you faced that adversity and you just kept pushing through because it was something you loved doing and you were passionate about it, and you've proved to be overall successful because of it. And I think that's really important for younger generations, especially the ones that are facing a lot of challenges in their life. You can overcome those hard times and really be successful. So that's the key takeaway that I've taken from having conversations with you. So Yvonne, is there anything that you would like to add or mention before I let you guys go?
Well, I see, I have been with the Rosies when they've given presentations to all kinds of groups and students. And the Rosies are independent and they are just what you said, they're upbeat. They're upbeat. They just see the possibilities. I think maybe something about their war experiences opened up the idea that you're always in a problem solving mode. You're looking for possibilities and you're looking for ways to help. Just like you said, you collected cans as well as plane spotted, and you saved oil and fat and lard because that was used for munitions. I think that there's something about that spirit that says we can solve this. We can work towards something greater. I just see it in their presentations.
That's a great point. And I think that's what is truly inspiring about the Rosies, is that they continue to pass that spirit along to anyone that they talk to. So I just want to thank you both again for taking the time out of your day. And I look forward to staying connected with both of you. I would love to come to one of your events when things start opening up more and meeting more Rosies if possible. I know that there's some that are getting to the end of the
Meaghan, there's a really active group in Michigan. You're not too far.
I'll have to come and say hello to them for
And we're
sure.
hoping maybe we'll be able to actually have our convention next year. We haven't been able to be live in convention the last couple of years, but let's see. Dolly, you went to convention in New Orleans. That was fun. Yeah, when we went to New Orleans together.
Really, really.
I mean, she went alone and we all joined up in New Orleans, like I said, independent spirit. And you've been to the Rosie the Riveter Park in California. And I'm just hoping that we get to go somewhere and have a gathering and be inspired.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I will definitely keep my ears open so that I can come join you, because I would love to meet more Rosies and just hang out and chat about, whatever you want to chat about. It would be really, really fun.
Hey, you know what? There's a 102-year-old Rosie in Casey, Illinois. And
from where I live.
And this 102-year-old Rosie, she's actually named Rose Penrod. Anyway, she She called me at the beginning of the pandemic and said, "Are you okay? I've experienced 2 other pandemics, and I just want you to know we'll get through this." So she's calling me to give me encouragement.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel. I love it. That's so funny.
Light
That's
at the end
great.
of the tunnel.
Well, if there's any other Rosies that would like to come on to Mavens and share their story, please let me know, because I would love to have them and share their stories. And I look forward to staying connected and collaborating with you guys more. And to everyone that joined us today, thank you so much for joining Mavens of Manufacturing. I hope you enjoyed Dolly's story as much as I did. If you want to learn more about Rosie the Riveters and their association, you can go to rosietheriveter.net, as in hairnet. I remember that from the last time we spoke. And, check out their association. They're doing amazing things. And if you can donate to their cause, please do, because their history is important, and it opened up a lot of opportunities for women like myself to pursue things in manufacturing. So,
And I would love to suggest to people, you don't know what your grandmothers did, I'll betcha. I mean, that's so often. So find out what your grandmothers did and record your parents. If they know any of the stories, record it now, either live or write it down, because we don't think to keep the stories until too late. And there are so many questions that we could ask. So everybody out there, do that. Talk to your parents and find out about your grandparents. What's your grandma do?
that's a great point. Well, thank you, you two. Have a great weekend. And to everyone listening, please join in again next week for another Mavens of Manufacturing story. Have a great weekend.
Thank you for having us.
This episode of Mavens has been sponsored by Fresh Horizons Group. Fresh Horizons Group is a family-run company that was founded on the premise of helping organizations and businesses better tell their story through high-quality branded apparel and promotional items. Freshen up your brand by contacting Fresh Horizons today at freshhorizonsgroup.com.